Atomic Heart has a lot going for it when it launches: a unique premise, a strong setting, and interesting player characters. Atomic Heart has a promising story at its heart and several design elements that make it stand out. But as the game progresses, players will realize that the game stretches its best and worst parts until nothing remains. A simple game of Atomic Heart will take around 25 hours, which is usually a solid play time. This gives the game plenty of time to set up its story, dive into the most interesting parts, and flesh it out with interesting mechanics and gameplay. But it's not that. Less than half of that playtime involves anything interesting or entertaining, and the rest is just annoyingly bloated, resulting in a game that can best be described as a mess. The story of Atomic Heart has its moments. Players will take on the role of Major Sergei Nekiv, who is also known in the game as P3. Nekiv, a special mission officer assigned to the hero of the Soviet Union, Dimitri Sechinov, wears a pair of AI-controlled gloves called Charles, which allow Nekiv to talk to people during the game and unlock some special abilities. Basically, Charles is pretty much the same as Cuff in the Prophecy, which is probably the best point of comparison for Charles in all aspects. Sechinov is about to launch something called Collective 2.0, and it's up to P3 to uncover and stop a conspiracy that will prevent that launch. Various secrets and relationships are revealed along the way, and there are some exciting moments amidst the chaos. But confusion is woven into everything else about its history. P3 is pulled in every direction and every character in the game manipulates him, or so it seems. Everyone wants him to accept some truth, but none of them admits the truth. This in turn creates some seriously confusing conversations as P3 plays both sides. With each passing hour, the back and forth between him and Charles was so frequent that it was impossible to tell what P3 or Charles were thinking. Perhaps the best way to describe it is that Atomic Heart's entire story is based on a choice between two evils, one bad and one worse, and the player is constantly torn between them. It's an interesting setup, but nothing pays off until the end of Atomic Heart. In fact, Atomic Heart's combat and gameplay should be enough to overcome its distracting story. There are elements of survival and stealth, the need to find blueprints and resources, an open-world sandbox behind the Atomic Heart Facility 3826 setting, a unique world convergence, mechanical and mutant threats, a wide range of weapons and combat capabilities, and more, all of which prove that Atomic Heart is ambitious. But to achieve that much adds a fair amount of padding to the game. For example, there are some fun things to do in the open world, like finding new weapon blueprints and an event called Training Grounds, but they're rare and ultimately uninteresting. With gauntlet powers, various weapon and item mods, and tons of enemies, combat in Atomic Heart should at least be engaging, but it isn't. Whether it's a SHOK ability, or a simple shotgun, or something like dynamite, none of the attacks have power. Sometimes an enemy will be knocked back, but most bots can shake it off and move on. Players simply have to punch until enemies fall to the ground, seemingly at random. At the same time, the game introduces several bosses that seem interesting at first, but by the second or third player realizes that they all basically use the same abilities and reward the same fighting styles. With no changes, every boss encounter in Atomic Heart feels like the last. It doesn't matter the size, location, or type of boss. When a player is done with one, they finish all of them. The game's development mechanics are forgettable, but for the worst reasons. Instead of weapons, collected resources, or blueprints, players can craft how to gain or upgrade the gauntlet's abilities. That's because the cooking mechanic involves a strange red refrigerator robot that violently grabs players, makes nasty sexual comments, and often harasses them during their first few encounters. At one point, the production machine just stopped doing it without any explanation, and the strange event felt like a fever dream that never happened. As for the tone, the strangest Atomic Heart game will never be so strange. It's really a miracle. This makes it shocking through the floor. Players essentially make their way through open-world facilities that essentially act as the dungeons at the heart of Atomic Heart, but the problem is that each dungeon has so many levels that it's easy to forget why the player is there. The puzzles are scattered haphazardly and don't add to the experience, just prolong an otherwise simple task. Almost every gate has a pointless puzzle. For example, when players are tasked with exiting one of the dungeons, they must find two items that open the doors. To do this, you had to go back to the area to find both items, and when you used them, it turned out that they did nothing more than power the door. They are then tasked with finding 4 more random objects, which becomes the entire length of the mission in itself, and by the end of it, players won't remember what they were supposed to do when they left. The same goes for almost every dungeon. Removing this bloat from Atomic Heart will easily drop its playtime down to around 10 minutes 12 hours and make it a much better game as a result. In fact, someone could play Atomic Hearts for 12 hours a day and feel like they improved by about 3 minutes 4 hours. The short playtimes ensure that the game moves at a snail's pace in all aspects. And to make matters worse, Atomic Heart is absolutely riddled with performance issues and bugs on the Xbox Series X. Almost an hour went by without having to reload old saves, often resulting in a lot of progress being lost. There are also some hard crashes, but the biggest ones are system reloads and saves. Sometimes doors won't open, objectives will disappear, or the game will act like we're still completing objectives we did hours ago, but each reload of the game fixes this. However, Atomic Heart's idiosyncratic and sporadic autosave and checkpoint system had us occasionally losing 20 minutes to 2 hours of gameplay or getting stuck in a game that just appeared out of nowhere. All quest lines and sections must be completed again, otherwise checkpoints will be triggered as soon as the player makes a mistake. So death or failure from a technical point of view is an extremely severe punishment. P3 will spend a lot of time asking why the door is so hard to open or why he's doing a given task, and so will the player. It feels like the P3 and the player are being betrayed every time. Atomic Heart story, gameplay, and world design show promise, but generally lack the payoff. Atomic Heart launches on February 21st for PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X, S. Our rating, 2 out of 5. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and support my channel.